I recently took the IELTS for the first time and I scored an 8.5 overall, which is the second highest band. Today I'll be sharing some tips on how you can score an 8.5 overall in your IELTS, especially if you're taking it for the first time like I did. So let's get started. Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Rachel here. As always, hit the subscribe button so you never miss a thing. If you're new, if you aren't, welcome back. You can also like this video so that it is fair to other viewers as well. So like I said, today I'm going to be sharing some tips, especially for Nigerians. I'm Nigerian. I sat and wrote my IELTS in Nigeria, in the British Council in Abuja, and so I'm going to be sharing some tips on how you can practice and prepare for writing your IELTS in general. That was the first time I was taking it. I registered by myself. I didn't go for any classes. I didn't attend anything, any webinar, any master class. I didn't pay anybody for anything. I prepared by myself and I wrote the test. So I scored an 8.5 in my reading, 8.5 in speaking, 8.5 in listening, and an 8.0 in my writing. And then the average overall was the 8.5 band. So I'm just going to say that I know that a lot of people usually stress a lot about, how crazy the IELTS is. Yes, preparing for it might be quite a lot, and it's not something that I would suggest that you leave to the very last day. Admittedly, I left mine to like 4 days before because I like when things are still like fresh in my head, but it's not something that I would say you should leave to the last day. I think it's something that you should be preparing well ahead of time, especially if English is not your first language or you're not a native English speaker. I know that in Nigeria we speak English generally in school and it's like our first language of communication, so a lot of people are used to speaking English, but depending on the type of IELTS that you want to take, paying attention to what may be required is very important. So the IELTS is the International English Language Testing System that is very popular and used around the world, especially for academic qualifications and maybe immigration purposes. This is usually what they would ask for, just to test your English proficiency. There are 3 types. There's the academic, of course, if you want to do higher education or things like that. There's the general training, which is if you want to get like a visa, a work visa, or maybe like you want to study as well. And then there's the life training, maybe if you want to get a family visa or you want to apply for citizenship. So each of the tests within them are pretty much similar, but they each have like different components. So the one I sat for was the academic, the IELTS academic, which you can use for higher education. How the IELTS is typically graded is that there are 9 bands per section. There's 4 sections. There's the listening, the reading, the writing, and then there's the speaking. Usually the speaking happens separate from the other 3, and in each category there are different bands to show how well of an English speaker you are. So there's 9, which is expert user, 8, which is very good, 7, which is good, 6, competent user, 5, modest user, 4, limited user, 3, extremely limited, 2, intermittent, 1, non-user, 0, did not attend the test. So for each of the sections, you have to make sure that you actually prepare well and make sure that you know what to expect when you go there. So there are different ways of taking the test. I, for example, took the computer-based IELTS, which is that my listening, reading, and writing were done on a computer, and my speaking was done like at the test center, which I'm coming to. So I'm going to look at each of these sections and just give you tips on what I did that I was able to get my 8.5. I actually read a lot of books because I love to read. Like, I love learning new things. I love learning new words. So that is one thing that I feel like gave me an added advantage, because with reading books, what you do is that you get to learn a whole lot of new vocabulary. So what I did was I researched, right? I did a lot of research just to see what typical speaking exams are like. One thing that I did that really helped me was the IELTS test prep app. Once you register and they send stuff to your email, they'll send you materials, and those materials are very similar to, in fact, if not the same as the one on the app. So I made sure that I used the app, and I did at least 2 practice tests for each of the sections. It's very, very important that you do at least 2, just to time yourself. Make sure that you turn off all your phones, all your notifications, and do practice tests. The truth is, you can never really practice enough for the IELTS because you never know what questions that they're going to ask. But for the speaking, for example, you might know what they will ask, and for the listening, you sort of know what to expect. So I made sure that I practiced at least 2 tests. In fact, before I started practicing tests, I went into the app, I read about the test, I knew knew what to expect, the test format, if there are any tips, if there are any quizzes, any pop quizzes, just to see like a checklist of what I have done or what I haven't done. And I did all this like 3 to 4 days before the exam, just so that everything was still fresh in my head. Speaking test lasts maybe about 15 minutes and it has 3 different parts. The first part is like an introduction. You get into the room, you sit down with the examiner, he introduces himself, you introduce yourself, and then he will ask you just introduction questions like maybe what type of accommodation do you stay in, tell me about your hometown, where you're from, or your village, maybe what's your favorite thing or whatever. This is usually for like maybe 1 to 2 minutes or so. And I mean, to be fair, don't take it personal if the examiner interrupts you as you're talking, because each answer should literally be like for 20 to 25 seconds. But then you might just be talking until he gives you that prompt that you should stop. So usually they might interrupt you as you're talking, and that's perfectly fine. What I would say is you should also Google, do some research, what type of questions are typically asked in the first part of the speaking exam. So now the second part is where you're going to be given a topic to talk on for 1 to 2 minutes, but you'll be given 1 minute ahead of time to prepare. So you will be given like a notepad and a pen to write down some things like pointers at the back of your head so that you don't forget, because at the end of the day this is still an exam situation and you might be tense and you might be under pressure, you forget a lot of words. You actually typically know how to speak English on a normal day, but it's an exam, so things fly out of your head. So you can have a paper to write down things that will be given to you. Just write down your talking points and what you want to say. So for 1 to 2 minutes you'll be allowed to talk. Just keep on talking as much as until your examiner tells you to stop. It's good to research questions too that can actually pop up in this, and just try on your own to record yourself talking to yourself. Talk to yourself in the mirror. Practice, especially the type of words that you may use. So the examiner is also looking out for the type of words that you're using, how well you're able to communicate your ideas. If they ask you a question that you don't particularly agree with, if they say, do you think that everybody in the world needs to speak English, there's no right or wrong answer. They're just trying to see how you communicate your own ideas, how you're able to put together your points in a logical way that you can analyze what they're saying and just put it forth. So you can use simple English, you can use complex English, anyone that you're comfortable with. If you need time to take a break just to like pause, you can pause. You know, if you don't understand what the examiner has asked, you can ask him to repeat or ask her to repeat, and then you talk for the 2 minutes. When you're done, you enter the third part, which is where the examiner would ask you questions based on what you have said, and then you can give your responses. So it's almost like a conversation, but the middle part is just that you're doing a short 1 to 2 minutes presentation on things that you would typically talk about to anybody. The only difference is that, okay, you remember that it's an exam. Now for the reading, writing, and listening, I think I'll just put the tips together so that this video is not that long. Practice, practice, practice. You cannot practice enough. But like I said, for the listening, you can have an idea of what is going to come up in the exam and how it's going to be structured, especially on a computer screen in terms of listening and hearing. So in the listening, you're going to be played an audio tape for a certain length of time, and you have to pay attention to what they are saying so that you can fill in the gaps. I'm sure with your practice test, you understand what I'm saying. Don't dwell. If you missed something and you see that they're getting to the next part, please don't dwell. If you dwell, you can end up missing everything that you are listening to. Don't dwell on the fact that you can't find one. At the end of the day, you can preempt what might be coming or what to look out for when you're listening. And if you've missed something and you're going back, you can sort of assume what the right answer might be. There is no negative marking, so you should attempt all questions, even if it's something that you feel like might not be the right one. I think the most important tip is to not dwell when you have missed out a point. Instead, move on to the next space that you know that you're going to fill. And it's also good that you read over the questions before the audio starts playing. The audio would only be played once, and there's no repeat, there's no rewind, there's no sorry, I didn't hear this one, that one. So even around you, try as much as possible to just be focused. Like, do you know when they say zone out? Make sure you zone out. If somebody around you stands up or raises up their hand, resist the temptation to look around at any sudden movements, because once your brain gets distracted, if you're not very good at multitasking, you're going to lose out on that particular point, and that will make you want to dwell, to struggle to hear the last one, and then you end up missing the next. So I think for me, that was a very critical thing that I did in terms of my listening. By the time you do your research, you will know what I'm talking about in terms of the listening test. Reading, you're basically reading comprehension passages. Just, you know, each passage has its own broad topic about what it's talking about, and then some of the things are German objectives, some of the things are, you know, German OBJ, some of them are filling the gaps. But it's like reading a comprehension passage from what we did in secondary school and university when you were doing like an English test or an English literature test. So that's basically it. It's just to make sure that you look and pay attention to the details. I would particularly advise that you do not read the passage in detail as soon as you're looking at it. There's that temptation. Make sure that you skim because you don't have time. You think you have time, but you really don't have time. Listening is 40 minutes. I think reading and writing is 60 minutes. So you really don't have time to read the passage in depth if you're answering 40 questions in 60 minutes. So make sure that the first time that you're looking at it, skim the passage. When you go to the questions, you can now go back in detail to see what exactly it is that you want to get. And that was what helped me for my reading test. Another thing was to pay attention, and this applies to listening, reading, and writing. Make sure that you pay attention to the instructions that are written above. Sometimes they'll tell you write not more than 2 words in the gap. Sometimes they'll tell you write 1 word only. Make sure that you pay attention to those instructions, because you can actually lose a mark if you wanted to write the green forest and the answer is green forest. You can actually lose a mark for that. So pay attention to the instructions. Lastly, I would say that for the writing, I scored the least, which is so funny because I went and overdid and was there writing 5 billion things. I don't even know what I was writing. If you're not very good with a computer or you're not fast with typing, then maybe you should do the traditional type of test, which is like a paper-based, but make sure that your handwriting is legible. Now, the thing about writing with paper-based is that you have to be able to count your words and make sure that it's within the instruction limit of the word count that they've given to you. Now me, I know I won't have time to do that, so I use the computer because at the bottom you can literally see your word count as you're typing. So I felt like it was of better advantage to me because I use my computer a lot and I can type fast. So if you know, each one has their pros and their cons, so you have to ultimately choose the one that you want. But I think for the writing test, what helped me was also practicing as well, to know the type of questions that I may be asked to write about. There are 2 parts to it. The second part apparently takes more marks, so please make sure that you give yourself enough time. It's 60 minutes, but they will advise that you use 20 minutes or 25 minutes for the first part and use 40 minutes for the second part, because the second part takes twice as much as the first part. And remember that they're not testing the accuracy of your answers or your worldview or your perception in life, so there's no right or wrong answer. The most important thing is the way you're able to express yourself, your spelling, your typos. There is no automatic spell check, there's no grammar check when you're using the computer, so the computer is not going to underline anything red if you miss a spelling or you miss something like that. So you have to make sure that you go back to reread, check your capitalization, your commas, your semicolons, your use of conjunctions, whatever it is that you're trying to use. You can keep it simple. If you want to show them that you know certain things, you can add a bit of things there, but don't go and overcomplicate things. You can practice to see what type of questions are typically asked in the part 1 and the part 2. The last thing that I would say is that if you're taking the test as a computer-based test, then you should definitely Google, search YouTube and see what it looks like, what you're going to have to click on. I don't think that your test day should be the first time that you're seeing it on the computer as to how the listening, writing, and reading tests are going to be. And they have like simulations on YouTube where you can actually look for that. I'll leave the link to the prep app that I used, and then I will leave the link to some videos that can show you how the computer-based IELTS is going to look. So I think those are the basic things that I did. I would just say that if you're not a native speaker, you're not Nigerian, and you're watching this, then I would say, and if you know that you don't really speak English a lot, then I would say that you should definitely practice more. I don't think you should leave it to 3 to 4 days before the test. This is something that you should try and practice at least months before. Try speaking English with people, reading books in English, listening to audiobooks in English, podcasts, watching the news, watching Netflix in English, just so that you can get acquainted to how certain things are pronounced. And I feel like with these few tips, you'll be able to ace your IELTS. Remember, I took mine for the first time. I had never taken it before. I'd never been in that situation before. I went practice 3 to 4 days before, and I've told you all the things that helped me advantage-wise. So if you don't have that advantage, like you like to read a lot, or you watch series in English, or you speak English as a first language at your job, at your school, then I think that you have to go the extra mile for that. I hope that these tips were helpful, they were valuable. Please let me know in the comments if they were helpful or if they were valuable to you. Let me know eventually when you take your IELTS how it goes for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to like. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.